Do 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 do. A descent into madness. Thoughts on the embrace of vigilantism in the USA. 65 Christmases back, I was a noticeable bulge in the belly of my mama, Betty Jean. I emerged kicking and screaming in the spring of 1961, which is when my infant baptism into the Catholic Church began my indoctrination into the zeitgeist and mores of my time and place. Thanks to the GI Bill, I was reared in an upwardly mobile, middle-class, Midwestern, decided Catholic, but not fundamentalist household. Unexamined central themes of my upbringing included peace on earth, goodwill towards man, which coexisted with stand your ground, but don't go looking for trouble. In the later part of the 1960s, our pastor's sermons often centered around nonviolence, though this same priest would likewise praise U.S. Armed Services and law enforcement for keeping us safe and free. I was introduced to the four Christian Gospels long before I could read, and Jesus loves me, this I know, was a fundamental cornerstone of my indoctrination. Being a curious child in both senses of the word, the summer before I started kindergarten, I began paying some attention to national news, including riots that broke out August 1965. I don't remember the Watts riots, but I do remember the July 1967 riots in Detroit because my mother's brother and his family were living there, and 6-year-old me had a tenuous grasp on the possibility of harm coming to them. None did, as well as those in Madison, Wisconsin a few months later, because my ISU college professor father had been a guest lecturer there prior to the riots. Though I was double digits before I ever heard of Malcolm X, praise for Martin Luther King Jr. was commonplace in my home, and 7-year-old me regarded the riots that broke out after his assassination as the height of irony. Side note, following a slight alteration of Bloomington, Illinois school districts, Oakland Elementary was desegregated in September of 1970 when a single busload of students, including 2 African American students, began attending my school. This brother and sister were harassed and mistreated by my schoolmates from the day they arrived until the end of the school year for daring to come to our school. My family moved to the Maryland side of D.C. in August of 1971, so I did not witness how African American students fared at Oakland following June of 1971. Like most boys of my era, I would occasionally get in scuffles with my elementary classmates. None of these were serious, none resulted in injury, and I thought little of them other than not getting caught. I was neither more nor less violent than my peers, and I took these small scuffles in stride. Though my rare fistfights ended in 1972, it wasn't until spring of 1975 when I received a copy of Jean de Hartog's 783-page novel, The Peaceable Kingdom, that the idea of pacifism began percolating through my brain. In addition to being the longest book 14-year-old me had ever read, The Peaceable Kingdom took me through the history, beliefs, and practices of Friends, aka Quakers, including their staunch belief in pacifism, a belief that intrigued me highly. A few years after reading Hartog's book, I read an article about how Mahatma Gandhi's pacifistic equality campaign would have failed utterly had he faced the Nazis rather than a very war-exhausted Great Britain. A very apt and accurate observation, in my opinion. True pacifism does not allow for the use of violence in self-defense. So unless one's opponent has legal restrictions that prohibit attacking non-violent protesters or has qualms about imprisoning, harming, torturing, or killing said protesters, then pacifism is an invitation for the violent to slaughter the pacific. I realize that while I'm a huge believer in nonviolence, we have a right to take defense against direct attack, a view I had refined and reinforced 42 years ago while attending the University of Maryland College Park. The only physical education class I took at UMCP was street fighting. The course focused on staying out of trouble, being fit enough to run away if possible or to fight if necessary, having a break your attacker's knee and run plan, and most importantly for this bit of writing, what qualifies as self-defense and what plummets from rightful legal defense down to assault, flying under a false flag of self-defense. My favorite example provided by my instructor involved an armed assailant and an armed would-be victim with a definite demarcation between firearms and knives. If an assailant is in close proximity and threatening with a knife, then deadly force, including shooting the assailant in order to stop the perpetrator, is legally justified. If an assailant is in close proximity and threatening with a firearm, then deadly force, including shooting the assailant in order to stop the perpetrator, is legally justified. If an assailant is not in close proximity and threatening with a firearm, then deadly force, including shooting the assailant in order to stop the perpetrator, is legally justified. If an assailant is on a vigilante mission and is out hunting people you deem better off dead, and you feel that said vigilante has a right to use deadly force because said vigilante is killing the bad guys, then you, in addition to be a huge part of the problem, are also a sad commentary on the state of the United States mental health. Final note: if you are willing to use violence against a human for any reason and call yourself a pacifist, then you are absolutely bastardizing the term. Pacifists do not use violence. I pride myself on being nonviolent, but understand that I have a right to use appropriate levels of violence in self-defense. Furthermore, I would go so far as to say we have an obligation to use appropriate levels of violence in immediate defense of other, a statement to which I always add, if someone is attacking my grandchild or another youngster, I pray I will stop at only appropriate levels of violence in the name of that youngster's defense.